Situation. The government, breaking news, is struggling right this minute to explain the largest data breach in history. It's all happening on Capitol Hill today, but U.S. investigators are quick to blame the Chinese for stealing this data and just as quick to ask for more money to keep the rest of the data safe. Fox Business senior Washington correspondent Peter Barnes with the latest details of what's been going on right where you are, Peter.
Well, hey, Liz, the director of the government's personnel office, Catherine Archuleta, testified before the Senate Appropriations Committee today. She asked lawmakers to support the administration's request for an additional $21 million next year for making the agency's computer systems more secure with so-called secure shell upgrades. That would be on top of the $70 million the agency budgeted for that work last year and this year. So it's looking at more than $90 million for stronger cybersecurity so far. But a government auditor charged the agency with lowballing that figure on what it will cost to fix the problem.
Its estimate of $93 million includes only the initial phases of the project, which covers tightening up the security controls and building a new shell environment. The $93 million estimate does not include the cost of migrating approximately 50 major IT systems to this new shell environment. The cost of this work is likely to be substantial.
So they're looking at possibly more money to fix the problem. Liz, back to you.
The problem that they blew with the money they already had. Peter, thank you very much. What must it feel like to be one of those millions, to know that cyber criminals have all, and we mean all, your information? Victim number one, we found him. A Fox Business exclusive, Alan Lopatin joins us. Alan has been informed his personal data has been stolen in this massive breach. He's worked for years in the government as a federal employee. He's currently the legal counsel for the National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association. And Joe Loomis is the head of cybersecurity giant CyberSponse. He works directly with top government agencies, including the FBI. Alan, to you first. Well, I guess you're the one. Of the 13 million? I mean, it's unbelievable how many this really could be. How did you find out that you were a victim?
Well, I did get an email on the second day that the Office of Personnel Management was notifying folks, and this latest news about 18 million possibly and many more. I'm just surprised in the last hour that it hasn't even grown larger, and it is just, it's really scary as to what might be available out there, what of my information might be out.
Well, we should tell people that you've worked for the government. You've been a civil servant for many years. You were with President Clinton's healthcare reform task force. You were deputy general counsel to all kinds of House committees. What must they have on you besides Social Security and all your personal information? Who knows? You know, the Chinese are looking supposedly for people who are Chinese and maybe have done work with other people. It's frightening, isn't it?
When you go to work for any employer, you divulge information. With the federal government, even more so because of issues like security clearance. And the type of information is very personal, very sensitive, and who knows what might be out there. Aside from Social Security numbers, there's more information that really puts at risk not just my financial resources, but the lives of myself, my family, and loved ones.
Oh, I can only imagine how disquieting it is. Joe, you're head of CyberSponse. You work directly with top government agencies. Did you work directly with this one? I hate to say it, is this your company's fault?
Oh, no, not at all. Actually, what it is our company more helps organizations and governments respond to these types of attacks. And me, myself, also have been personally affected because I actually held the top secret clearance when I was active duty. And I will clarify that the amount of data that's required to obtain a clearance of that level is extraordinary. We're talking relative Social Security numbers, employment history, travel schedules, et cetera. It's very, very, very dangerous.
Oh, so your dad, your mom, relatives, all of that information is out there now?
Everything from your employment to your education, your transcripts, your travel schedules, your relatives' Social Security numbers. You know, top secret clearances and clearances alike are very extensive in how they look at not just the individual, but the individual's network, origins, family, and their own social networks as well.
Right. I mean, we always hear about the background checks, and they find out and they go talk to old boyfriends and girlfriends. Alan, you're a lawyer. Is there some recourse that somebody like you would take against the government now that this is all out there?
Well, I've been interviewed on these personal background checks as well. I think we need the kind of protections. If we don't even know the scope of the issue, how do we know the extent of the safeguards that we need to have in place?
You think it's bigger than 18 million?
It could well be, and the issue is what information has been disclosed. The National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association has talked about lifelong credit corrections and credit support, but we really need to look at the extent of the issue before we know the extent of the remedy. And we need to be indemnified.
Joe, how
there
big
could
is
well
this?
be damages long beyond this date.
How big is this really going to be? We're hearing 30 million.
It's
More?
definitely going to be in the higher numbers. We can rewind the wheels of time and talk about the initial reports of when other retailers have been breached, and we found out that the numbers were exponentially going up. We're dealing with an issue of redundancy and deduping type of data. I would definitely place my bets on the fact that the data is going to increase exponentially.
Oh, joy. Isn't that
And the depth of
lovely
that
news?
detail is really an issue. You know,
The
that's the thing.
depth
It's not
of the
just numbers.
detail. We'll have you both back. Alan Lopatin, who is a victim, and Joe Loomis, you're a victim. We didn't even know that. That is unbelievable. You should listen to the next segment, because I have two people sitting here shaking their heads. Pulitzer Prize winner and Fox News contributor Judy Miller. I'm sure you've had your personal data torn inside out by the government.
Yes.
Fox Business senior correspondent Charlie Gasparino.
I probably have to, and I just don't know it.
I just don't know it. But Judy, you were
Exactly.
sitting there shaking your head when you heard Alan talk about how anxious he is and all that's out there. Where does this story lead us?
Oh, it's going to lead us into the biggest investigation into an internal collapse of a system that I think we've seen in a long, long time. What was breached was the standard Form 86s. These is 127 pages of documents, information that the people who were applying for classifications, for jobs, for transfers
Wait. Per
give.
person?
Per person, 127 pages worth of documents about with whom they associated, families, relatives, personal information. This stuff leads who knows where, and the fact that this information was not encrypted, was not authenticated, was not protected is just shocking. Mike Hayden, the former CIA director, NSA director, said, look, if I could have gotten that information from the Chinese, I would have done it in a minute. Bad on us. This is not about China. This is about us and our incompetence.
Charlie, members of Congress are taking out LifeLock, to protect themselves now because they are so worried about this.
Does that work, that stuff, the LifeLock stuff?
Apparently it does up to a point. Does anything work is the question.
I will say this. I think government is, what this obviously shows is how late government is into this game of protecting against cyber fraud. I mean, the banks, they've been attacked, like J.P. Morgan, Citigroup. They've been
Hundreds
attacked
of times a day.
Hundreds of times a day. And, sometimes you get through, but basically there hasn't been a real major breach where people, lost money, where the average guy had his bank account depleted, or securities account depleted. So, maybe this is time for government to take a page from private industry and essentially see what J.P. Morgan is doing well or better than government is doing.
But they don't do this as well as the government does. That was the line that Mike Rogers, the former congressman, was selling when he was encouraging private companies to come in and speak to the government
we
about
need-
is that true?
encrypting their
We
data.
need a
Yes.
contest.
No, but
Yes.
is it true that they don't do better than
This is what he said. The Defense Department does this better than anyone. Trust us. I'm now saying it's time to verify.
Yeah, well, I think we need to bring in the private sector and start a contest, like an X Factor contest. All right, Judy, Charlie, thank you very much. We have a closing bell about 50 minutes away. The search for two escaped killers